I always knew I was the black sheep of my family. In the Johnson household, perfection wasn't just expected, it was demanded. My father, Judge William Johnson, ruled the house with the same iron fist he used in the courtroom. My mother, Eleanor, was the picture-perfect high society wife, obsessed with maintaining appearances. My older brother Michael was their golden child, Harvard-bound, obedient, and everything I was not. And then there was me, Emily, the disappointment, the rebel, the one who never quite fit into their world of carefully curated perfection. I had learned to survive by keeping my head down, by choosing my battles carefully, but deep down I knew I was living in a cage. I wanted freedom, but I never expected it would come in the most devastating way possible. It started with a missed period, then two. I tried to ignore it, but the signs became impossible to deny. The morning sickness, the fatigue, the way my body felt different, foreign. The moment of truth came in a dingy gas station bathroom, the pregnancy test trembling in my hands. I held my breath as the seconds dragged on, my heart pounding so loudly it drowned out everything else. Then, there it was. 2 pink lines. Positive. My stomach dropped. This couldn't be happening. I stared at the test, as if willing the result to change, but no matter how many times I blinked, the truth stared back at me. I was 19 years old, unmarried, pregnant, and completely, utterly alone. For a while, I convinced myself I could handle it. I could figure things out. Nathan, my boyfriend, would stand by me. We'd make it work. But as the days passed, that confidence crumbled under the weight of reality. I had no idea how wrong I was. Telling Nathan was supposed to be the easy part. We met at our usual spot, a quiet park on the edge of town, where we had spent so many nights talking about our future, how we'd escape this place, how we'd finally be free. When he saw me, his face lit up with that familiar smile, the one that had once made me feel safe. But the moment he noticed the tension in my shoulders, the way my fingers twisted anxiously in my lap, his smile faltered. "Emily, what's wrong?" he asked, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. I couldn't sugarcoat this. "I'm pregnant." The words felt foreign, like they belonged to someone else, but the way Nathan's face drained of color made it all too real. He blinked once, twice, then let out a sharp, nervous laugh. "You're joking, right?" I shook my head, my throat tightening. I took 3 tests, all positive. His hands went to his hair, fingers threading through it in frantic disbelief. No, this can't happen. We're too young, Emily. We can't." I already knew where this was going, but I let him say it anyway. "You need to get rid of it." His voice was flat, almost casual, like he was asking me to cancel an appointment instead of talking about our baby. A cold chill ran down my spine. "You're serious," I whispered. He looked at me, his jaw clenched. "What else are we supposed to do? You think we can raise a kid? We have no money, no future. This will ruin everything." Everything. Everything meant his future, his dreams, his life. Mine? Mine didn't matter. Something inside me shattered. I had spent so much time believing we were in this together, that we were a team, partners. But now, standing at this crossroads, I saw the truth. Nathan wasn't strong. Nathan wasn't ready. Nathan was running, and I would not chase him. I stood, my legs shaking beneath me. "Get out of my sight." "Emily, don't. Get out." My voice was sharper now, louder, filled with a rage I hadn't known I was capable of. He didn't try to argue. He just turned and walked away. And just like that, I was alone. Telling my parents was worse. I waited until after dinner, when my father was seated in his oversized leather chair, his face buried behind the newspaper. My mother sat across from him, delicately sipping tea, while Michael was on his laptop, probably drafting his next law school application. I cleared my throat, my pulse hammering in my ears. "I have something to tell you." My father didn't look up. "Then say it." I swallowed hard. "I'm pregnant." The reaction was immediate. The newspaper crumpled in my father's fists as he slammed it down onto the table. My mother's teacup shattered against the hardwood floor. Michael froze, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. For a moment, there was nothing but silence, a silence so thick it felt suffocating. Then, my father's voice, low and dangerous. "You will get an abortion." Not a question, not a discussion, a command. My breath caught. "No." His face turned a shade of dangerous red. "Excuse me?" I straightened my shoulders, my hands trembling, but my voice steady. "I said no. I'm keeping the baby." My mother gasped like I had just confessed to a crime. Michael shook his head, muttering something under his breath. My father stood, his movements slow and deliberate, like a man.
The night I left my parents' house, the air felt colder than usual, as if even the world had turned against me. I stood on the sidewalk, gripping my duffel bag with trembling hands, my breath forming small clouds in the night air. I had no home, no money, nowhere to go. I stared at my phone, my mind racing. Who do I call? My parents had made it clear. I was dead to them. Michael wouldn't help me, and Nathan had made his choice, but there was still one person, Aunt Rachel. She had always been the black sheep of the family, the one who had dared to walk away from my father's iron rule. She had chosen love over reputation, and for that she had been exiled from our lives, her name only spoken in hushed tones like a scandalous secret. My hands shook as I dialed her number, praying she hadn't changed it. The phone rang once, twice, then, "Hello?" Her voice was groggy, laced with confusion. I glanced at the time. 2:07 a.m. Of course she was asleep, but I couldn't wait. "Aunt Rachel, it's me, Emily." A heavy silence filled the air. Then, her voice, cautious yet soft. "Emily, what's wrong?" I opened my mouth, but no words came out. How do you tell someone that your entire world has collapsed, that the people who were supposed to love you had cast you out like garbage? I need help," I finally whispered, my voice barely holding together. Aunt Rachel didn't hesitate. "Where are you?" The drive to Rachel's house was long, and the silence between us was thick. I kept waiting for her to ask questions, to lecture me, to judge me, but she didn't. She just glanced at me every so often, her expression unreadable before finally speaking. "Your father always had a way of making people feel small," she murmured. "I should know. He did the same thing to me." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Why?" Rachel sighed, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "Because control is more important to him than love." Her words settled deep in my chest. Because she was right. My father didn't love me. Not really. He loved control. And the moment I stopped being the obedient daughter, the one who fit into his perfect image, he erased me. Just like he had erased her. Rachel's home was nothing like my parents' house. Where theirs had been grand and suffocating, filled with furniture no one was allowed to touch, Rachel's house was small but warm, with mismatched pillows on the couch and the smell of coffee lingering in the air. She led me to a small guest room, flicking on the light. "It's not much, but it's yours for as long as you need it." I stood there for a moment, staring at the simple bed, the worn dresser, the tiny lamp casting a soft glow over the room. And then, for the first time since my father disowned me, I broke down. I sank onto the bed, my body racked with silent sobs. All the fear, the pain, the betrayal. It came crashing down at once. Rachel didn't say anything. She just sat beside me, placing a gentle hand on my back. "You're not alone, Emily," she whispered. "You never were." The next few days were a blur of exhaustion and uncertainty. I spent hours staring at my phone, willing Nathan to call, to text, to at least acknowledge the mess he had left behind. But he never did, until he did. A week after I moved in with Rachel, my phone buzzed. Nathan's name flashed across the screen. My heart leapt into my throat. Was he calling to apologize? To say he had changed his mind? I answered quickly. Nathan? A long pause. Then his voice, cold, detached, nothing like the boy I had once loved. I talked to my parents, he said. They think we should make this go away. I gripped the phone tighter. Make this go away? He sighed. Emily, we're too young. We're not ready. I'm not ready. Just get rid of it and we can go back to how things were. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. How things were. My voice was shaking. Nathan, I'm carrying your child. This isn't some mistake I can erase. You're being dramatic, he snapped. You can't seriously be thinking about keeping it. I laughed, but it was cold, bitter, full of something I hadn't felt before, resentment. I'm not thinking about it, I said, my voice steady now. I am keeping this baby. Silence. Then he scoffed. Then I guess you're on your own. And just like that, he hung up. I stared at the phone, my chest tightening, the weight of his words pressing down on me. You're on your own. But this time, something inside me shifted. I wasn't alone. I had Rachel. I had my baby. And that was all that mattered. That night, Rachel found me sitting at the kitchen table, staring at an unopened envelope, a letter from my father's lawyer, officially severing me from my family's finances. I have nothing, I whispered. Rachel sat down across from me, her eyes calm but firm. You have more than you think, Emily. I let out a hollow laugh. Like what? She reached across the table, placing her hand over mine. A second chance. I looked up at her, searching her face.
I'll help you get back on your feet, she continued. We'll find you a job. You can go back to school. You don't need your father's money. You don't need him at all. Her words lit a tiny flame inside me, small but steady. For the first time since my world had collapsed, I started to believe I could rebuild it. I wasn't the obedient daughter anymore. I wasn't the girl who had been cast aside. I was Emily, a mother, a survivor, and my story was just beginning.
The days after Nathan's call were some of the hardest I had ever faced. The reality of my situation weighed on me like a crushing force. No home, no money, no future. But if there was one thing I knew for certain, it was that I wouldn't give up. I had made my choice, and I would fight for it. Rachel didn't treat me like a broken girl. She treated me like someone who could survive this. The very next morning, she sat me down at the kitchen table, slid a notebook in front of me, and said, "Let's make a plan." I blinked at her. "A plan?" She nodded. "You're going to need a job, and you're going to need to finish school." I let out a hollow laugh. "Right, because people are lining up to hire a pregnant college dropout with nowhere to live." Rachel didn't flinch. She just leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. "Do you want to prove your father right?" The words hit me like a slap. Number I didn't. I wanted to prove to him, and to myself, that I didn't need him, that I could build my own life without the Johnson name, without the money, without any of it. So I picked up the pen, and I started writing down a plan. Finding a job was brutal. Everywhere I applied, I got the same pitying look. The, "Sorry, we're not hiring right now," or worse, "Maybe try again after the baby's born." But then, one afternoon, luck finally turned in my favor. Rachel had taken me to a small diner just outside of town, a family-run place with cracked leather booths and the smell of coffee lingering in the air. The owner, Evelyn, was wiping down the counter when Rachel approached her. "She's looking for work," Rachel said, nodding toward me. "She's smart, hardworking, and she needs someone to take a chance on her." Evelyn raised an eyebrow, glancing at my stomach. The unspoken question was there. Would I even be able to keep up? I spoke before she could ask it. "I know I don't look like the best hire right now, but I promise I'll show up on time. I'll work hard, and I won't make excuses. I just need a chance." For a long moment, Evelyn just studied me. Then, finally, she sighed. Be here tomorrow at 6 a.m. I could have cried. Work at the diner was harder than I expected. My feet ached constantly, my back throbbed from the long hours, and the smell of grease and coffee clung to my clothes, no matter how much I washed them. But I didn't complain. Every shift, I reminded myself, this is for my baby. This is for our future. And over time, I became part of something bigger. The other waitresses, mostly older women who had been through their own struggles, took me under their wing, showing me how to balance trays, deal with rude customers, and survive the long hours. Evelyn was tough, but she was fair. She never made me feel like I was a burden. And when she noticed how I handled difficult customers with patience, how I kept up with orders without falling apart, she started giving me extra hours. "I've seen a lot of girls come through this place," she told me one evening. "Most of them crack under pressure, but you're stronger than you think." For the first time in a long time, I felt proud of myself. Balancing work and school was another challenge. Rachel had helped me enroll in night classes at a local community college, but between the diner and my pregnancy, exhaustion was my constant companion. There were nights when I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my textbooks through blurred vision, fighting the urge to give up. "You don't have to do everything at once," Rachel reminded me one night when she caught me nodding off over a pile of notes. But she didn't understand. I had to do it. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for hope. Then came the moment that changed everything. One night, after a particularly long shift, I walked into the apartment to find Rachel sitting stiffly on the couch, an envelope in her lap. "What is it?" I asked, my stomach twisting with unease. She didn't answer right away. She just held the envelope out to me. I took it, my fingers trembling as I slid it open. Inside was a formal-looking letter, and at the top, in bold letters, I saw the words, "Petition for relinquishment of parental rights." My breath caught in my throat. "What is this?" Rachel's expression was unreadable. "It's from Nathan's family." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Rachel continued, her voice even. "They want you to sign away all rights to the baby. In exchange, they'll pay you a settlement, enough to cover school, living expenses, whatever you need. But if you sign, you'll never see your baby again." My vision blurred as I stared at the paper in my hands. Nathan had truly abandoned us. And now, his family wanted to erase me completely. They thought I would take the money and run. They thought I would give up, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. I lifted my gaze to Rachel, my jaw tightening with determination. "Burn it," she hesitated. "Emily, are you sure? This is a lot of money. I don't
Care. My voice was firm, unwavering. I will never give up my child. Not for them. Not for anyone. Rachel nodded slowly, then took the papers from my hand and tossed them into the fireplace. I watched as the flames consumed the document, turning the words to ash, and with it, I burned away any last tie I had to my past. I wasn't the same girl they had abandoned. I was stronger. I was a mother, and I would never let anyone take that away from me.
Burning the petition felt like setting fire to my past, but it didn't erase the wounds left behind. Every night I lay awake, one hand resting protectively on my growing belly, thinking about what came next. I had fought so hard just to survive, but was surviving enough? That question haunted me for weeks. Then, one evening, Rachel came home with a newspaper clutched in her hands, her face pale, her eyes flickering with something between anger and disbelief. "You need to see this," she said, tossing it onto the kitchen table. I hesitated before looking down at the front page, and then my blood turned to ice. Judge William Johnson announces senatorial campaign. "Family values are the foundation of our society." Beneath the headline was a picture of my father, standing next to my mother and Michael, smiling like the perfect American family. I stared at the photo, numb, barely registering the words in the article. My father spoke about morality, integrity, and the importance of strong families, the same man who had thrown his pregnant daughter onto the streets without hesitation. I could hardly breathe. He had erased me, like I never existed. Rachel's voice pulled me from my spiraling thoughts. There's more. She reached into her bag and pulled out another piece of paper. This one was older, slightly yellowed with time, but it sent an even colder chill through me. It was a birth certificate, but it wasn't mine. It wasn't Michael's either. It was for a child named Sarah Johnson. I looked up at Rachel, confused, alarmed, unable to form the question screaming in my head. She answered anyway. "You're not the only child your parents abandoned," she said. "Sarah was born before you and Michael. She was different." The air around me seemed to crackle with the weight of her words. Rachel sat down across from me, her hands clasped tightly together. Sarah was born with a disability. She didn't fit into their perfect image, so they left her at the hospital and pretended she never existed. I felt physically sick. "How did you—" My voice cracked. "I knew," Rachel admitted. "I found out when I was younger, when your mother let something slip. I confronted your father about it. That's when they cut me off." Tears burned behind my eyes. I thought what they did to me was bad. But this was worse. They had discarded an innocent baby, just like they had discarded me. And now my father was standing on a political stage, preaching about family values. I could feel rage rising in my chest like a storm. "How do we find her?" I asked. Rachel blinked. "What?" I lifted my chin, my voice steady and filled with a determination I had never felt before. "Sarah, how do we find her?" Rachel hesitated, but she could see it in my face. I wasn't letting this go. She let out a slow breath. "I have a friend, a private investigator. If she's alive, he'll find her." I nodded, gripping the edge of the table. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about justice. It took 3 weeks, 3 agonizing, nerve-wracking weeks. But finally, Rachel got the call. "She's alive, Emily," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "And she wants to meet you." The moment I walked into the cafe, my heart nearly stopped. Sitting near the window was a woman, a little older than me, with soft brown hair and kind eyes that looked like mine. Sarah. She looked up as I approached, and when our eyes met, I saw a flicker of recognition, as if she had been waiting for this moment her entire life. I sat down across from her, struggling to breathe. She smiled, hesitant but warm. "So, you're my sister." The words sent a shiver down my spine. I had never had a sister, not really. But suddenly, here she was, a piece of my past, a piece of the family my parents had tried to erase. "I guess I am," I whispered. She stirred her coffee absently, her gaze dropping for a moment. "I always wondered about them, about who they were." "They don't deserve to know you," I said, my voice sharp. "They never did." Sarah smiled sadly. "I know that now." She looked up at me again, her eyes filled with a quiet strength. "I always thought I was alone," she admitted. "But I wasn't, not really, and neither were you." For the first time in a long time, I felt whole. I wasn't alone. I had a sister, and together, we were about to bring down the people who had thrown us away. Meeting Sarah changed everything. For so long, I had believed I was the only one my parents had abandoned, the only one they had discarded to protect their perfect image. But now, I knew the truth. They had done it before, and they had gotten away with it, until now. Sarah and I spent hours talking, piecing together our shattered pasts. She had been adopted by a loving family, raised with kindness, the kind of love I had never known growing up in the Johnson household. But despite the good life she had built, she had always felt a missing piece, an unanswered question about where she had come from. Now, that question had an answer, and we both knew exactly what we had to do next. A week later, my father was hosting his big campaign fundraiser at the grand ballroom of the city's most prestigious hotel. Politicians, reporters, and wealthy donors would all be there, waiting to hear him speak about his vision of leadership, morality, and family values. It was the perfect place to bring him down. Sarah and I walked through the doors, dressed to blend in, but the second we entered, heads turned. I saw recognition flicker across some faces. I had grown up in this world, after all. But my father? He didn't see me, not yet. We slipped through the crowd, waiting for the moment. The air was thick with phony laughter and empty pleasantries, the kind of environment my father thrived in. At the front of the ballroom, a massive banner hung, displaying his campaign slogan, "Family first, morals always." I nearly laughed out loud. A few minutes later, the chatter died down as my father stepped onto the stage, adjusting his suit, flashing his signature confident smile. And then he started talking. "As a father and a husband," he began, "I know that family is the foundation of society. A strong family unit creates strong individuals who contribute, who lead, who uphold the values we all cherish." I gritted my teeth, my hands clenching at my sides. This man, this fraud, had thrown away not one, but two of his children, all in the name of maintaining an illusion. And now he was using that illusion to climb higher, to gain more power. Not anymore. Sarah's hand tightened around mine. "Ready?" she whispered. I nodded. Then, as my father continued his speech, I stood, loudly. The sound of my chair scraping against the marble floor made heads turn. At first, my father didn't notice, but then I spoke, my voice clear and unwavering. "Tell them the truth, Dad." Silence crashed over the room. Every eye turned toward me. My father's mouth froze mid-sentence. His expression was priceless. Shock, then confusion, then something close to fear. "I'm sorry, young lady. Don't act like you don't know me," I cut him off. My voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm Emily Johnson, your daughter, or at least I was, until you threw me out when I refused to have an abortion." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Reporters' heads snapped up, cameras flashing, pens scribbling furiously. But I wasn't done. I took a deep breath, turning toward Sarah. "And this," I said, "is Sarah Johnson. Another daughter of yours, one you abandoned at birth because she wasn't perfect enough for you." This time, the gasps were louder. My father's face turned a sickly shade of gray. My mother, who had been seated in the front row, covered her mouth with trembling hands. Michael sat stiff as a statue, his knuckles white as he gripped the armrest of his chair. "Two children," I continued, my voice shaking with controlled fury. "Two daughters you erased, just so you could keep up your perfect reputation. Tell me, Dad, does that fit into your family values campaign?" Someone let out a shocked whisper. A few voices muttered to each other. The energy in the room was shifting, doubt creeping in, people realizing that their golden candidate wasn't what he seemed. My father tried to recover, clearing his throat. "This is nonsense. I don't know what." "You don't know us?" Sarah interrupted, stepping forward. Her voice was sharp, unwavering. "Then why do we have DNA test results that say otherwise?" Another round of gasps. Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out a thick folder. She handed it to the nearest journalist, who eagerly flipped it open. I could already see the gears turning in the reporters' heads. This was a scandal they wouldn't let go of. My father finally lost his composure. "Enough of this," he snapped, his voice shaking with anger. "These are lies, fabricated by a troubled young woman trying to ruin my campaign. I let out a cold laugh. You mean both of your troubled daughters? A murmur rippled through the audience. People were starting to believe us. My father turned to security, waving a hand. Get them out of here! But before anyone could move, Sarah took the microphone from the podium, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. No, Dad. You don't get to silence us again. She turned toward the audience, her eyes blazing. I was left at. Walking out of that ballroom felt like walking out of a cage I had been trapped in my entire life. The whispers, the camera flashes, the panicked look on my father's face. They were all signs that for the first time he had lost control. But I knew this wasn't over. I had set the fire, but now I had to watch it burn. The next morning, my phone exploded with notifications. Headlines filled every major news site. Senate candidate exposed for abandoning 2 daughters. Judge William Johnson's family values. Facade shattered. Secret children, come forward. What else is he hiding? I scrolled through article after article, watching as the carefully curated image my father had spent decades crafting unraveled overnight. Reporters hounded him for answers, but every statement he gave only dug his grave deeper. My daughters are disturbed. They're manipulating the public for attention, he said in one interview, his voice clipped, his expression tight. But the public wasn't buying it. Because then Sarah stepped in. She had been quiet after the confrontation, letting the truth sink in. But now, she took control of the narrative. She spoke to the press, sharing her story with raw honesty. My biological parents didn't even hold me before they left me, she told one reporter, her voice calm but powerful. They decided I wasn't worth loving because I wasn't perfect. They abandoned me, erased me. And then they did it again to my sister. The story went viral, and my father's campaign, it crumbled. A week later, I got a call I never expected. Michael. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. For years, my brother had been the perfect son, the obedient heir to my father's legacy. He had never fought back, never questioned anything. So why was he calling me now? Against my better judgment, I answered. Emily, he said, his voice tight, controlled. I said nothing. I need to see you. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Now you want to talk? After everything? I didn't know, he said quickly. I didn't know about Sarah. I didn't know. Stop, I cut him off. You knew what they did to me, and you said nothing. Silence. Emily, please, he said, his voice softer. Just meet me. I need to explain. I exhaled slowly, my mind screaming at me to say no, but curiosity won. So I agreed. We met at a quiet cafe on the edge of town, far from prying eyes and reporters. Michael looked different, less polished, less perfect, like the weight of our family's destruction had finally caught up to him. He sat down across from me, running a hand through his neatly styled hair. I don't expect you to forgive me, he started, avoiding my gaze. I need you to know that I was scared too. I scoffed. Scared? You weren't the one tossed out like garbage. His jaw tightened. No, but I was trapped. My whole life, Dad told me what to do, who to be. I couldn't question him. I couldn't even think for myself. Because if I did, he swallowed hard, I'd lose everything, just like you did. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to hate him for standing by while I suffered. But for the first time, I saw something real in my brother's eyes. Fear, regret, maybe even shame. Still, it wasn't enough. You had a choice, I said quietly. You always had a choice, and you chose them. Michael let out a slow, shaky breath. I know, and I'll never forgive myself for it. I stood up, grabbing my bag. I don't hate you, Michael, I admitted. But I don't trust you either, and I don't think I ever will." He looked like he wanted to say something else, maybe beg for forgiveness, but I wasn't interested. I walked away, leaving him alone with his regrets. In the days that followed, my father's life completely fell apart. His campaign was officially withdrawn. His reputation was in ruins. He had to step down from the bench, no longer the powerful, untouchable judge, but just a disgraced man with nowhere left to go. Then came the final blow. Rachel and Sarah had dug deeper. They hired a lawyer, and it turned out my father had more skeletons in his closet than just the ones he left behind. Financial fraud, tax evasion, bribery. His perfect world wasn't just crumbling, it was collapsing. And the cherry on top? My mother filed for divorce. One evening, I sat outside on Rachel's porch, watching the sky fade into shades of pink and orange. I felt lighter. For so long, I had been carrying anger, pain, betrayal. But now it was over. My father could never hurt me again. As I sipped my tea, my phone buzzed, a text from Sarah. We did it. A small smile tugged at my lips. Yeah, we did. I looked down at my growing belly, placing a hand over it gently. For the first time in my life, I wasn't living in my father's shadow. I wasn't just a discarded daughter. I was Emily, a survivor, a mother, a woman who refused to be erased. And as I sat there, feeling the smallest kick from the baby inside me, I knew one thing for certain. I had won.
The lesson: strength, survival, and breaking the cycle. Emily's story is more than just a tale of betrayal and revenge. It's a testament to resilience, self-worth, and breaking free from toxic family cycles. She was abandoned, left to fend for herself, and expected to fail. But instead of crumbling, she rose. She fought back, not with hatred, but with the one thing that always prevails: the truth. Her father, a man who built his life on control and deception, fell by his own hand. He thought he could erase the past, but the past doesn't stay buried forever. No matter how powerful someone seems, lies always catch up to them. And in the end, Emily didn't just expose him. She won by building the life he tried to take from her. She found real family in Rachel, Sarah, and her daughter Hope. She created a future where love, not reputation, mattered most. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more real-life stories of betrayal, revenge, and redemption, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Men's Cheating Story. Your support helps bring more eye-opening stories to light. What would you have done in Emily's place? Let us know in the comments. Alert: